Welcome to the Filmmaker U weekly show. At Filmmaker U, we are an industry site for film professionals to learn and deepen your existing skill set. Every week, we bring in a film professional to discuss their work, and this is made possible by our sponsors, OWC. You can go to owcdigital.com for all your filmmaking needs. This week, our guest is Amelia Allwarden, editor of Pen15, Little Fires Everywhere, and more recently, Westworld. Welcome to the show, Amelia.
Hey, thanks for
Uh,
having me.
I know people probably really want to talk to you about Westworld, but I really want to talk to you about Pen15.
Let's do it.
um, how did you get involved with that show?
Pen15, oh my gosh, it's my favorite show ever, and I love being a part of it so much. In 2018, I got a call from a friend and mentor of mine named Doc Krotzer. He's an editor who I was his assistant editor for several years and then moved up to editor alongside him. And he got a call to interview to edit Pen15, but he wasn't available. And he was like, well, if you want someone who edits like me, you should talk to Amelia. So they interviewed me. I interviewed with Maya and Anna and Sam, the showrunners, and met with them, and they showed me a 10-minute pilot presentation that they had made to get the show sold, and I was completely obsessed with it, and I just wanted the job so badly. And at the time, I had only cut one episode of TV, but I had also cut several comedy short films, which they also watched, which we talked about a lot in my interview. And I was driving home from meeting them, and before I even got 10 minutes back, they called me, and they're like, we want you to cut the show. So it was so exciting.
So, when you realized that it was going to be adult women pretending to be teenagers, like at what point did you realize that? What was the situation in that scenario?
Yeah, well, I heard the concept right away, and I was like, okay, this could be really bad or really good. But then when I saw the pilot presentation, I saw Maya and Anna embodying the characters. It was 10 minutes of them just acting like the characters that you've seen in the show. And that was the thing where I was like, oh, I get it. I see it. I see it completely. And actually, I remember walking into the interview room and being like struck by how adult Maya and Anna looked in person, because I had never seen them, except for a couple of still photos, as adults. I had only ever seen them as the characters before I met them. So I was totally convinced and totally sold on it. I might have not been so sold if I hadn't seen that pilot presentation. I think it's part of the reason why they made it in the first place, because it's a really hard concept to kind of sell without seeing.
Mm-hmm. Well, how did you? Because what part of the humor in it is there's these it's awkwardness basically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so how did you approach cutting those awkward scenes and letting us sort of sit in those moments that are, because as an editor you're going to want to tighten things up and make things as smooth as possible, but a
Mm-hmm.
lot of it is us sitting there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the thing that I talked about with Maya and Anna in my initial interview was the fact that they wanted to be able to go seamlessly between drama and comedy. They didn't want it to feel like just a sketch comedy. No shade to that, but that's just not the show they were trying to create. And so what they were interested in my skill set was the fact that I had cut drama TV as well as comedy shorts. And so I basically, those awkward moments are kind of played sincerely from the perspective of a 13-year-old. That's kind of how I approach it, where I'm not like lingering on something to be like, this will be funnier and more awkward if I just stay on it, but I'm actually just trying to think about the true perspective of a 13-year-old, and that's, horror. And when you're 13, those situations are the most dramatic thing you could ever experience. So it really is kind of fusing the comedy and drama pacing, I guess. But I'm really in all of those scenes just trying to be as true as I can to that 13-year-old perspective.
Now, was there a particular scene or moment that was pretty challenging in Pen 15?
Pretty challenging. I mean, yeah, I mean, a lot of it. It's all a lot of improv, and that can always be challenging because of blocking issues. In the sleepover episode in season 2, it's 5 different girls improving all over each other. 2 of them are Maya and Anna, the other 3 are actual kids, and the blocking's changing and the lines are being crossed, and that was definitely, a really challenging episode to cut because tonally, I kind of tried to push it like a horror episode, but you can only go so far with that. And then, there was a million ways to honestly cut that episode, so it was really challenging for me in terms of like, should their truth or dare sequence be a montage? Should we play out all the truth or dares? Should we, and there's so much improv to work with. So it was definitely a beast of an episode, but I'm really happy with how it turned out.
So with so much improv, is there a moment that you had to cut somewhere in the show that you were like, I really wish that could go in, but it just didn't work for the scene or the moment, something that you thought was really funny?
Yeah, I mean, there's always little things like that I'm like, I think it's funny, but it's not right for the show. Like, in that same episode, Anna says, like, an improv, they're all saying, like, we're never gonna forget this night, we're always gonna remember it, and they're putting their hands in, and then Anna says, like, when I'm an old bitch, when I'm 30, I'll never forget this night. And I thought it was so funny, I laughed out loud during the dailies, but then, I tried to put it in, and I was like, okay, this doesn't feel like Anna the character. This is like, we're not doing the meta jokes very much, and I always try stuff like that, but that's like a line that was cut that I'm like, okay, this clearly isn't right for the character. It was funny, probably be in a gag reel sometime, but in terms of actual story beats that were cut or things like that, I always, there's nothing that's been cut from the show that I felt was like purely integral to the series, because Maya and Anna are so collaborative and so receptive to the things that I say. I would die on the sword for this moment, and they listen to that. And I think that we all kind of put our heads together and make sure the things, there's never any regrets left on the table after we're done cutting the episode.
So how did you make your transition from that to Westworld? Because I feel like they're so polar opposite in terms of tone and even visual effects, right? So how did
Yeah.
you make that journey?
I actually worked on season 2 of Westworld before I worked on Pen15. So my background as an assistant editor was in more drama series, and I got bumped up on a show called Good Behavior, which is a TNT drama. And after I got my bump on Good Behavior, that's when I went and became an assistant editor on season 2 of Westworld, because Good Behavior got canceled, and I really wanted to pursue my editing career, but I couldn't find an opportunity outside of short films. So I said, okay, if I'm gonna be an assistant editor on another show, I'm gonna try and have the most challenging show possible, and that was Westworld. And luckily I worked with such amazing people, like the best post team that I've ever worked with on Westworld. And so once I met everyone there, I kind of like created all my relationships, and they knew that I had already cut an episode of TV, and by the end of season 2, Evan Rachel Wood had directed a short film, and I was able to cut that with her. And so kind of the producers on the show recognized that I was moving up as an editor. And actually that's why I didn't go back for season 3, because I just needed to get more credits. And so I did 2 comedies, Pen15 and Boomerang. Then I did 2 dramas, Impulse and Little Fires Everywhere, to try and diversify my editing skills before I came back. I actually just did a horror series for Netflix as well. And before I came back to Westworld for season 4. And so that, I'm just trying to be the editor that can cut every genre.
Well, that's one of the toughest things, because editors get so pigeonholed, right? Well,
Mhm.
cinematographers, anyone in the film industry gets sort of pigeonholed.
Yeah.
So in Westworld, one of the things that's difficult, especially with even season 3, so one of the things that happened for me when I watched Westworld is I binged it, right? I waited till the series was done, then went through the whole thing. And then for whatever reason, season 3 was, I think, 2 years later they were releasing it. There was like a huge gap.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's a very complex show. So when you're working on a show with that large gap between season 2 and 3, and you're trying to keep all these different threads together, what are the discussions like? How do you approach this series to make sure that the audience doesn't get lost and can still keep up with what's going on?
I would say that Westworld is a show that's not that hung up on making sure that the audience, we're not spoon feeding on Westworld. So I think that a lot of people who are really diehard fans of the show, they'll listen to companion podcasts, they'll go on Reddit, they'll rewatch episodes, look for clues, things like that. So in terms of refreshing the audience on previous seasons, it's, at least my experience from season 2, talking about season 1, was not, okay, we got to remind everyone what happened or anything like that. But it is very complex, and it definitely requires a lot of discussion and a lot of constant conversation between the whole post and editorial team. And on season 2, I had a bulletin board in my office that had, for the finale of season 2, it was like a screenshot of every scene in the episode and sticky notes for which timeline they're in. And it was the way for us to visualize, like, okay, what's happening? And we have to figure out how this all comes together. And I always joke that it looked like a murder board in my office, but
it was
red string going all over the place.
Yeah, just like the Charlie Day thing.
No,
yeah, but no, I mean, it's all very constant conversation about, the complex and very interesting and intelligent ideas that are going on throughout the series.
So what attracts you then to like a movie or a show, I guess mostly shows, because you've done, like you said, drama and comedy and horror for Netflix. What is it that you look for in scripts? What is it that excites you when you see a script?
Yeah, I mean, the story is the core of everything. I think if I can connect to the story, if I feel like moved by it, if I laugh at it, if I am scared by it, if those are the things that draw me to a story much more than the genre. I kind of like watching every genre, so I don't really feel like I'm only one type of editor, for sure. I think that I could see myself doing a musical, or I could see myself, I don't know what I will be doing next, but I feel like as long as I'm connected to the story, that's going to be the only thing that matters for me, really.
Interesting. So, in something like Westworld is very VFX heavy,
mm-hmm.
and when you're dealing with visual effects, a lot of time you're putting in temp stuff, or you're working with green screen that doesn't have anything in it, or you might even have shots that don't exist yet. So, how do you work with that footage to come up with a sense of pacing or timing for a scene?
Well, we have really talented visual effects editors in offline that we work with to time out the shots and make sure that, once the final visual effects are going to be put in, that things are going to be timed correctly. But we also do, work with visual effects to change the timings once shots do come in and start to roll shots and make sure that the pacing feels good actually once you have everything in there. But from getting the dailies day one, from making an editor's cut, our visual effects editors and our assistant editors really help to make the temps look amazing. Like, they look so good. I'm blown away by the temp visual effects that I get back. I expect it to look kind of, temporary. And I'm like mind blown every time, because I'm like, this looks final sometimes, depending on the complexity of the shot. but it's kind of just an ongoing collaboration, as it is with any other department in post, where we're just constantly feeling out the timing, adjusting accordingly, and yeah.
Is there like, because you've gone through the ACE intern program, you've worked on Pen, you're now here. Is there something that you learned through your career here that you wish you had known at the start?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when I did the ACE internship program, that is definitely when I got my like boot camp. Here's all the things you need to know. But one thing that one of my mentors, Sabrina Plisko, said to me when I was doing the ACE internship was that she said, "You don't know what you don't know." And that always stuck with me, because what she meant by that is that every job you're going to be learning something new. No matter how much you don't know everything. And I think that that rings true in that I never kind of walk into a cutting room presuming that I know everything. And I think that's really helpful, to feel like I can constantly learn from the other editors, from the other assistant editors, visual effects editors, etc. And kind of always leave myself open to learning more. Yeah.
It's interesting because I feel like a lot of young editors feel this pressure to, know everything, or come in and at least present like they know everything in the edit suite, which is hopefully starting to disappear with that sort of attitude of you don't know what you don't know, especially in an industry that's rapidly changing and moving to virtual production and what have you. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Oh, I just I feel like what was I gonna say about that? Forget it. It's fine. I don't remember what I was gonna say. My mind went blank. Keep going.
I have one last question that I like to ask everyone I interview. We've been stuck in this pandemic for over a year now, going on 2 years. Is there, during that time, people have turned to streaming networks to, entertain themselves when they're locked inside. Is there a show or a movie you discovered that you think people should check out?
I didn't really discover anything new per se, but I watched all of Mad Men, and I had never watched it all the way through before. And I also did the same with Breaking Bad, although I had seen that already. But those were the two things that were like a warm blanket for me. I feel like every night when I got to watch an episode of Mad Men, I was just like, oh, thank God I'm doing this. And I know that that's not news. A lot of people have seen Mad Men already, but man, it was just like so good to rewatch, and such an inspiring, kind of story, and the way they put it together. I love it.
Well, thank you so much for letting me interview.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And that's our show for today. I want to thank Amelia again for joining us. And of course, I want to thank our sponsors, OWC. Go to owcdigital.com for all your filmmaking needs. I'm your host, Gordon Burkell. Thanks for watching.